The heavy metal back door of the diner slammed shut behind Grace, cutting off the warm smell of frying grease. Out here in the Chicago alley, the wind felt like a knife slicing through her thin coat. Snow fell in thick, wet clumps, sticking to her cheap boots. She shivered and dragged the heavy trash bag toward the dumpster. Her fingers were numb. All she could think about was the thick stack of $100 bills hidden under her mattress. $50,000. That was the price she had accepted. She had pawned her entire future, her self-respect, her quiet life, all for immediate cash to keep her sick brother out of the streets. Kwon Hyun-woo had paid it without blinking. He had looked at her like she was a dirty little secret he wanted to play with, and she had let him. She needed the damn money. She hoisted the trash bag into the dumpster. It hit the metal bottom with a loud thud. "Grace," a voice said from the shadows. She froze, her heart hammered against her ribs. She turned slowly. Two men stepped out from behind a stack of wooden pallets. They didn't look like regular alley bums. They wore dark, expensive wool coats that brushed the snow. The one who spoke had a long scar running down his jaw. He was smiling, but it wasn't a nice smile. It was the kind of smile a wolf gives a rabbit. "Who are you?" Grace asked, her voice shook. She hated that it shook. "We work for Miss Park," the scarred man said. He pulled a thick metal pipe from inside his coat. "She doesn't like it when cheap trash touches her things, and Hyun-woo, he belongs to her." Grace took a step back, her boots slipped on the icy pavement. "I don't know what you're talking about, I just serve coffee." "Cut the shit," the second man snarled. He was bigger, with a thick neck and flat eyes. "Miss Park knows about the money, she knows about the hotel room, she wants her message delivered, and she wants it to hurt." The scarred man stepped closer, raising the pipe. "Hold her still," he told the big guy. The big man lunged. His heavy hand grabbed Grace by the hair, ripping a scream from her throat. She kicked out, her boot connecting with his shin, but he just laughed and yanked her head back so hard she saw stars. "Fucking bitch," the big man spat. "You're going to wish you never met him." Listen up, besties. If you are enjoying this story so far, please hit that like button right now. It really helps the algorithm push more dark, gritty romance videos like this to your feed so we can keep bringing you the heat. Also, drop a comment and let me know where you are watching from tonight, or rate this video from 1 to 10. But seriously, if you don't hit that subscribe button for Afro-Korean Love FM right this second, you might leave Grace to get her head bashed in by these goons in a freezing Chicago alley. Don't be the reason she loses all hope. Subscribe now and save her. Let's get back to the darkness. Grace thrashed wildly, her hands clawing at the thick fingers twisting her hair. The pain was sharp, pulling at her scalp until her eyes watered. The cold air burned her lungs as she gasped for breath. "Let go of me," she screamed, the sound muffled by the howling wind. "Shut her up," the scarred man said. He swung the metal pipe. Grace squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for the crack of bone. But it didn't come. Instead, a sickening thud echoed through the alley, followed by a wet crunch. The hand in her hair suddenly went slack. Grace stumbled forward, catching her balance against the cold, wet brick wall of the diner. She spun around, her chest heaving, her eyes wide with terror. The big man was on the ground, face down in the dirty snow. Blood pooled around his head, dark and almost black in the dim alley light. Standing over him was a man in a perfectly tailored black suit, seemingly untouched by the freezing wind. He held a sleek black gun equipped with a silencer. Behind him, two more men in suits emerged from the shadows like ghosts. Then Kwon Hyun-woo stepped into the light. He wore a long charcoal overcoat. His black hair was neatly styled, not a single strand moved by the wind. His dark eyes locked onto Grace, pinning her in place. He looked at the scarred man, who had dropped the pipe and was now backing away, his hands raised in panic. "You think you can touch what is mine?" Hyun-woo asked. His voice was quiet, smooth, and more terrifying than the thugs had been. "Mr. Kwon," the scarred man stammered, his tough act completely gone. "We were just following orders," Miss Park said. "Miss Park does not run my life," Hyun-woo interrupted. He didn't raise his voice, he didn't have to, and she certainly does not touch my things. He nodded slightly. The man with the gun raised it and fired once. A quiet popping sound cut through the wind. The scarred man jerked backward and collapsed into the snow, a dark hole right between his eyes. Grace let out a choked sob and pressed her hands over her mouth. Her whole body shook. She couldn't feel her toes anymore, but the cold was nothing compared to the ice in her veins. 2 dead men, right in front of her. Hyun-woo walked toward her slowly. His expensive leather shoes crunched softly in the snow. He stopped inches away from her. He reached out, his bare, warm hand gently brushing the snowflakes from her cheek. She flinched, pressing her back harder against the brick wall. "You're shaking," he said. You killed them," she whispered. Her voice sounded broken. "They were going to hurt you," he replied calmly, as if he had just swatted 2 flies. "I paid $50,000 for you, Grace. Do you think I would let some hired street trash break my investment?" "I just wanted the money," she cried, tears finally spilling over her cold cheeks. "We had a deal, one transaction. I sold you what you wanted, and I was going to disappear. I just want my quiet life back." Hyun-woo's eyes darkened. A small, cruel smile played on his lips. "Your quiet life is gone, Grace. The moment you took my money, the moment you let me into your bed, you painted a target on your back. My fiancée is a very jealous, very powerful woman. If I leave you here, she will send more men. Next time, they won't just try to beat you. They will cut you into pieces and leave you in the Chicago River." "No," Grace shook her head violently. "No, this isn't fair. I didn't know she was crazy. I didn't know any of this." "Fair is a word for children," Hyun-woo said. He stepped closer, crowding her against the wall. He smelled like expensive cologne and danger. "Right now, you have 2 choices. You can stay here, in this freezing alley with no resources, no allies, and wait for Miss Park's next hit squad to finish the job." He leaned in, his lips brushing against her ear. She trembled at the heat of his breath. "Or," he whispered, "you can come with me. I will put you in my private estate. You will be safe. No one will ever touch you, but you will stay inside those walls. You will be mine entirely." "That's a prison," Grace gasped. "You're asking me to lock myself away." "I am offering you your life," he corrected, pulling back to look into her eyes. "Suffocating protection is better than bleeding out in the snow, isn't it?" Grace looked at the 2 dead bodies. The snow was already covering them, turning them into lumpy white mounds. She thought of her sick brother at home, relying on that cash. If she died, he died. She had no one else. The police wouldn't help her. Miss Park's family practically owned the city's politicians. "Fuck," Grace muttered, the curse word tasting bitter on her tongue. "Fuck you." Hyun-woo's smile grew slightly. "Is that a yes?" She hated him. She hated his calm control, his money, his power. But most of all, she hated that he was right. She had pawned her future, and now he was collecting the ticket. "Yes," she whispered, looking down at her boots. "I'll go with you." "Good girl," Hyun-woo said softly. He grabbed her hand. His grip was tight, possessing. There was no gentleness in it. "Clean this mess up," he ordered his men without looking back. He pulled Grace out of the alley toward a massive black SUV idling on the empty street. The driver opened the back door. The warm air from inside hit her face, a sharp contrast to the biting winter storm. She climbed in, the soft leather seats sinking under her weight. Hyun-woo slid in next to her. The door slammed shut, sealing her inside his world. The tinted windows hid the dark, snowy streets, and the engine purred as the heavy car pulled away from the diner, leaving her old life behind forever. Inside the car, the silence was thick. Grace kept her eyes glued to her hands, rubbing her cold fingers together. She could feel Hyun-woo watching her. His gaze was heavy, like a physical weight pressing down on her chest. "You made the right choice," he said after a long time. "Did I?" she snapped, suddenly feeling a surge of anger. "Or did you plan this? Did you let her find out so I would be forced to run to you?" Hyun-woo chuckled. It was a dark, low sound. "I am a very busy man, Grace. I don't need to play games to get what I want. My fiancée found out because she has spies everywhere. It is the nature of our world, a world you know nothing about." "And what about my brother?" she asked, her voice cracking. "I have to take care of him. I can't just vanish." "Your brother is being moved to a private facility as we speak," Hyun-woo said casually, checking his expensive watch. "Best doctors in the state, paid for in full." Grace's head snapped up. "You had no right, you didn't ask me." "I don't ask for permission," he replied, his eyes turning hard. "I solve problems. Your brother was a weakness, a loose end Miss Park could use against you. Now he is safe, and you have nothing to worry about except pleasing me. I am not a toy, she spat, her hands clenching into fists. I took your money for a job, the job is done. Hyun-woo leaned across the seat. He moved so fast she didn't have time to shrink back. He grabbed her chin, his fingers digging into her jaw. He forced her to look at him. The job is done when I say it's done, he growled. The polite mask was slipping, revealing the ruthless predator underneath. You are alive right now because I allow it. You are breathing my air, sitting in my car, and heading to my house. You belong to me until I get bored of you. Do you understand? Grace swallowed hard. Her heart beat wildly against her ribs. She wanted to spit in his face, to claw his eyes out. But she saw the cold truth in his stare. He had just ordered 2 men dead without blinking. He would crush her if she pushed too hard. I understand, she whispered. He released her chin and smoothed the collar of his coat, the dangerous monster vanishing back behind the rich, handsome face. Good, he said softly. The drive to the estate will take an hour. Get some rest. You have a long life ahead of you, Grace. She turned her head to look out the heavily tinted window. The city lights of Chicago blurred by in the snowstorm. She felt tears prick her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She was trapped. She had traded one nightmare for another, and she didn't know which one was worse. Grace watched the towering skyscrapers give way to dark, winding roads. The city vanished, replaced by tall, skeletal trees covered in snow. The heater in the car was on full blast, but she still felt freezing inside. Are you hungry? Hyun-woo asked suddenly, breaking the heavy silence. No, Grace said flatly. You are lying, he said. He opened a small compartment between the seats and pulled out a silver flask and a small box. He handed her the box. Eat. You look like a strong wind could break you in half. She hesitated, then took the box. Inside were delicate, expensive-looking pastries. Her stomach growled loudly, betraying her. She hadn't eaten since yesterday morning. She picked up a pastry and took a bite. It was sweet and rich, tasting like a life she didn't belong in. Hyun-woo watched her eat, taking a slow sip from his silver flask. Slow down, he said. You will make yourself sick. I don't care, she mumbled with her mouth full. I care, he replied smoothly. I like my things in perfect condition. She stopped chewing. The pastry tasted like ash in her mouth. She placed the box back on the seat and wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. Stop calling me a thing. Then start acting like a woman who knows her place. He fired back, his voice low and dangerous. The SUV slowed down, turning onto a private road marked by massive iron gates. The gates swung open automatically, revealing a long driveway lined with snow-covered pine trees. At the end of the driveway sat a massive stone mansion. It looked like a fortress. Welcome home, Grace, Hyun-woo said, a dark smirk on his face. The heavy tires of the SUV crunched to a stop on the gravel driveway. Outside the tinted windows, the Chicago blizzard whipped snow against the dark stone walls of the mansion. It looked like a castle from a nightmare. There were no warm lights shining from the windows, just a cold, harsh glow that made the shadows look deeper. 2 men in thick winter coats stood by the massive front doors, holding large black rifles across their chests. They didn't even shiver in the freezing wind. The driver got out and opened Grace's door. The brutal cold rushed in, stealing the breath from her lungs. She sat frozen on the soft leather seat. Her legs felt like lead. If she stepped out of this car, she knew she was never going back to her small, messy apartment. She would never smell the cheap coffee at the diner again. Get out, Grace, Hyun-woo said from the other side of the car. His voice was calm, but it wasn't a request. She swallowed the hard lump in her throat and slid across the seat. Her cheap boots hit the icy gravel. The wind immediately ripped through her thin coat, making her teeth chatter. Hyun-woo walked around the back of the SUV and grabbed her upper arm. His grip was tight, his fingers digging into her muscle through the fabric of her coat. He didn't pull her gently. He marched her toward the front doors like a prisoner of war. The armed guards pulled the heavy wooden doors open. Hyun-woo dragged her over the threshold and into the house. The doors slammed shut behind them with a loud, final boom. A heavy metal lock clicked into place. The sound echoed through the massive space. Grace looked around. The entrance hall was huge. The floor was made of shiny black marble that looked like dark water. A giant glass chandelier hung from the high ceiling, casting sharp, bright light over everything. It was hot inside. The air felt heavy and thick, smelling like wood polish and expensive flowers. "Take her coat," Hyun-woo ordered. A woman in a neat black dress stepped out of the shadows. She kept her head down, not making eye contact with Grace. She reached out and pulled the cheap, wet coat off Grace's shoulders. Grace shivered, suddenly feeling naked in her faded jeans and old gray sweater. "You are safe now," Hyun-woo said, stepping in front of her. He took off his own expensive overcoat and handed it to the quiet woman. "No one can get through those doors." Grace stared at the heavy wooden doors. "Yeah," she whispered, her voice shaking, "and I can't get out." Listen up, besties. If your heart is racing as fast as Grace's right now, you need to leave a like on this video. Liking the video tells the algorithm to push more of these dark, gritty romance stories straight to your screen. And drop a comment right now. Rate this video from 1 to 10 so we know how we are doing. But listen to me carefully. If you do not hit that subscribe button for Afro-Korean Love FM right now, you are leaving Grace locked inside this cold, terrifying fortress with a man who thinks he owns her. Don't be the reason she loses her mind in this dark cage. Subscribe now and give her the strength to survive. Let's get back to the story. Hyun-woo grabbed her chin, forcing her to look away from the doors and up into his dark eyes. His fingers were warm, but his stare was freezing. "You do not need to get out," he said slowly, pronouncing every word like she was a stupid child. "The world outside wants you dead. Miss Park's family runs the police, the judges, and the streets. If you walk out that door, you will not survive the night. Do you want to die, Grace?" "I want my life back," she cried out. She hit his chest with her open hands, pushing him away. He didn't move an inch. "I want to see my brother. You can't just take him away and lock me in here. It's bullshit." Hyun-woo's face hardened. The slight trace of patience vanished from his eyes. He stepped forward, closing the space between them until his chest pressed against hers. She backed up, her boots slipping on the slick marble floor until her back hit the cold stone wall of the hallway. "Listen to me very carefully," he growled, bringing his face down until his nose almost touched hers. "I paid $50,000 to clear your brother's hospital debts. I paid another $100,000 to move him to a private, secure clinic where Miss Park's men cannot put a bullet in his head to punish you. I saved your damn life in that alley." He leaned closer, his warm breath fanning across her trembling lips. "You do not have a life to go back to. You sold it. To me, you are here because I want you here. If you want your brother to keep breathing, you will shut your mouth and learn how to be a good guest." Grace's breath hitched. Tears hot and angry spilled over her eyelashes and ran down her cheeks. She hated him so much her chest physically hurt, but the truth of his words hit her like a punch to the gut. She was broke. She was a target. She had nothing and he had everything. She had signed a deal with the devil for cash, and now the devil was collecting. "Fuck you," she whispered, her voice cracking. Hyun-woo just smirked. He reached up and wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. The touch was weirdly gentle, completely opposite to the cruel words he had just spoken. "I already did," he said softly, "and I will again, whenever I want." He grabbed her hand, lacing his fingers through hers tightly. "Come," he commanded. He pulled her away from the wall and dragged her toward a grand, sweeping staircase. Grace stumbled, her legs feeling weak, but he didn't slow down. He forced her up the stairs, his grip never loosening. The steps were covered in a thick red carpet that swallowed the sound of their footsteps. They reached the top floor. The hallway was long and dark, lined with heavy wooden doors. Hyun-woo walked all the way to the end and pushed open a set of double doors. He pulled her inside and flicked a switch on the wall. Soft, golden light filled the room. Grace stopped breathing for a second. The bedroom was bigger than her entire apartment. A massive bed sat in the middle of the room, covered in thick, dark gray blankets. There was a fireplace on one wall, a huge flat-screen TV on another, and a set of glass doors that led to a balcony. "This is your room," Hyun-woo said, finally letting go of her hand. Grace rubbed her sore fingers. She looked around the room, feeling small and dirty in her worn-out clothes. "Where do you sleep?" she asked, her voice tight with fear. "Down the hall," he replied. He walked over to a small table and poured himself a glass of dark liquor from a crystal bottle. He took a sip, watching her over the rim of the glass. "But I will be in this bed whenever it pleases me. Do not lock the door." Panic flared hot in her chest. "I didn't agree to be your whore. We made a deal for one night. One time, that was it." Hyun-woo slammed his glass down on the table. The crystal rang out sharply in the quiet room. He crossed the space between them in 3 long strides. He grabbed her by the shoulders and pushed her backward until the back of her knees hit the edge of the large bed. She fell back onto the soft mattress, bouncing slightly. Hyun-woo stood over her, looking down with cold, black eyes. "The deal changed the moment Miss Park decided to kill you," he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "I do not protect things that do not belong to me. If you are in my house, eating my food and hiding behind my guards, then you belong to me, every inch of you." He leaned over her, planting his hands on the mattress on either side of her head. Grace shrank back, pressing herself deep into the heavy blankets. "You smell like cheap grease, dirty snow, and fear," he said, his nose wrinkling slightly in disgust. "There is a bathroom through that door. Go wash yourself. Throw those garbage clothes in the trash. There are fresh clothes in the closet." He stood up, smoothing the front of his perfect suit jacket. He didn't look back at her as he walked toward the double doors. "I will come back in an hour," he said without turning around. "Be clean." He walked out and pulled the doors shut. A loud, heavy click echoed through the room. Grace scrambled off the bed and ran to the doors. She grabbed the brass handles and pulled with all her strength. They didn't move. She twisted the knobs, rattling them violently. Locked. "Hey," she screamed, banging her fists against the thick, solid wood. "Let me out. You can't just lock me in here. Let me out." She hit the doors until her knuckles turned red and throbbed with pain. No one answered. The heavy wood absorbed the sound of her screams. She pressed her forehead against the door, her chest heaving as she sobbed. She was really trapped. He had locked her in like an animal. After a few minutes, the cold reality settled over her. Crying wasn't going to open the door. She pushed herself away from the wood and wiped her face with the sleeve of her dirty sweater. She turned around and looked at the room again. It was beautiful, but it felt like a grave. She walked slowly toward the glass doors that led to the balcony. Maybe she could climb down, maybe there was a fire escape. She pressed her face against the cold glass and looked out into the night. The snow was falling harder now, spinning wildly in the wind. The balcony looked over the back of the estate. The ground was at least 3 stories down, a straight drop. There were no pipes to climb, no trees close enough to jump to. Down below, near the edge of the dark woods, she saw movement. A large man in a heavy coat was walking through the deep snow. Next to him was a massive black dog, pulling hard on a thick chain leash. The dog's head snapped up, looking toward the house, and it let out a deep, echoing bark. Grace stepped back from the glass, her heart hammering. He wasn't lying. She couldn't escape. Even if she managed to survive the drop from the balcony, the guards and the dogs would tear her apart before she made it to the trees. And even if she made it to the trees, she would freeze to death in the blizzard without a proper coat or money. She was completely, utterly stuck. She turned away from the window and looked at the bathroom door. She felt dirty. The smell of the dead men in the alley seemed to be stuck to her skin. She walked into the bathroom. It was a palace made of white marble and glass. A huge, deep tub sat in the middle of the floor, and a massive shower with glass walls took up an entire corner. The counters were covered in expensive soaps, lotions, and thick white towels. Grace walked over to the large mirror above the sink and stared at herself. Her face was pale, her eyes red and swollen from crying. Her dark hair was tangled and wet from the melted snow. She looked like a ghost. $50,000, she whispered to her reflection. Her voice sounded hollow. She reached down and pulled the hem of her sweater over her head, dropping it onto the pristine white floor. She kicked off her boots and peeled off her wet jeans. She stood naked and shivering in the bright bathroom, feeling more exposed and alone than she had ever felt in her life. She walked over to the shower and turned the gold handle. Hot water poured from the wide shower head, filling the room with thick, warm steam. She stepped inside, letting the burning water hit her cold skin. It stung at first, but then the heat sank into her freezing bones. She grabbed a bottle of expensive body wash. It smelled like sandalwood and vanilla. She scrubbed her skin hard, trying to wash away the smell of the alley, the smell of the diner, and the memory of Hyun-woo's hands on her. She scrubbed until her skin turned red and raw, but she still didn't feel clean. She felt marked, owned. She stood under the falling water, closed her eyes, and finally let herself cry out loud. The sound of the running water covered her loud, ugly sobs. She cried for her brother, lying in some strange clinic without her. She cried for her quiet, boring life that was gone forever. And she cried for the terrifying, dark future that was waiting for her in the bedroom outside. When the water started to turn cold, she finally turned it off. She wrapped a thick white towel around her body and another around her wet hair. She stepped out of the bathroom and back into the bedroom. The room was silent. She looked at the clock on the bedside table. 50 minutes had passed. He was going to be back soon. She walked over to the massive walk-in closet. The light turned on automatically when she stepped inside. Half of the closet was empty. The other half was filled with clothes perfectly her size. Expensive silk dresses, soft cashmere sweaters, and delicate lace underwear. He had planned all of this. He had known she would end up here. She grabbed a pair of soft gray sweatpants and a plain white t-shirt. She pulled them on quickly, desperate to cover her body. She sat on the edge of the giant bed, pulling her knees up to her chest, and stared at the locked double doors. She waited in the silence, listening for the sound of his heavy footsteps in the hall. She was a bird trapped in a solid gold cage, waiting for the snake to come inside. The silver clock on the bedside table ticked. Every second sounded like a hammer hitting an anvil in the massive, quiet room. Grace hugged her knees tighter to her chest. Outside, the Chicago wind screamed against the thick glass doors of the balcony, throwing handfuls of ice against the panes. She watched the brass handles of the double doors. She didn't blink. She was too scared to blink. Then the heavy metal lock clicked. Grace flinched, her whole body jerking backward on the soft mattress. The doors pushed open slowly. Hyun-woo walked in. He had taken off his dark overcoat and his suit jacket. His white dress shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, and his sleeves were rolled up to his elbows. He looked more relaxed, which somehow made him look even more dangerous. He was carrying a silver tray. He didn't say a word as he closed the doors behind him. He reached out and turned the lock. The loud click echoed in Grace's ears, sealing her fate all over again. He walked toward the bed. The rich smell of roasted meat, garlic, and hot bread filled the room, easily overpowering the light scent of the expensive soap Grace had just used. Her stomach cramped violently. She tried to ignore it, pressing her lips into a thin, hard line. Hyun-woo set the silver tray down on the small table near the fireplace. He turned and looked at her. His dark eyes slowly dragged up her body, taking in the oversized white t-shirt and the baggy gray sweatpants. "You look terrible," he said flatly. "I didn't pack a bag for a kidnapping," Grace snapped back. Her voice shook, but she forced the words out. Hyun-woo's jaw tightened. He walked over to the edge of the bed. Grace scrambled backward, hitting the huge, padded headboard. She pulled her knees up like a shield. He didn't stop until his knees hit the mattress. He reached out, his large hand wrapping around her ankle over the thick fabric of the sweatpants. His grip was an iron trap. "I did not kidnap you, Grace," he said, his voice dropping low and smooth. "I bought you, and then I saved you. You will do well to remember the difference before you open your mouth again. Get off the bed and eat, or I will strap you to a chair and feed you myself. All right, besties, listen to me closely. If your heart is pounding out of your chest right now, you need to leave a like on this video immediately. Hitting that like button tells the YouTube algorithm to push more of these gritty, dark romance stories straight to your feed. And drop a comment right now, rate this intense standoff from 1 to 10, or tell me where in the world you are watching from tonight. But seriously, if you do not hit that subscribe button for Afro-Korean Love FM right this second, you are leaving Grace all alone in this locked room with a man who holds her entire life in his hands. Don't be the reason she breaks. Subscribe now, join the family, and give her the strength to fight back. Let's get back to the darkness. Grace stared at his hand on her ankle. His thumb pressed firmly against her bone. She wanted to kick him. She wanted to scream for help. But the memory of the dead men in the snowy alley flashed behind her eyes. He was not a man who played games. He was a man who killed people and then went home to eat a hot meal. She slowly uncurled her legs. Hyun-woo released her ankle and stepped back, giving her just enough room to slide off the edge of the high bed. Her bare feet hit the thick, warm rug. She walked over to the small table. The tray was loaded with a thick steak, perfectly cooked, a pile of roasted potatoes, and a bowl of steaming green beans. There was a crystal glass of water and a heavy silver fork and knife. "Sit," he commanded, pointing to a velvet armchair next to the table. Grace sat. She picked up the heavy silver fork. Her hand was trembling so badly she could barely hold it. She looked up at Hyun-woo. He was leaning against the fireplace mantel, his arms crossed over his chest, watching her. "I want to call my brother," she said. She put the fork back down. It clinked loudly against the plate. "If he is at some new hospital, he is going to be terrified. He doesn't know where I am. I need to talk to him." "No," Hyun-woo said simply. "Why the hell not?" Grace yelled, her anger finally burning hotter than her fear. "You have me locked in a fortress. What is a phone call going to do?" "A phone call will get you both killed," Hyun-woo replied. His face didn't change. He showed zero emotion. "Miss Park's family owns half the telecommunication networks in this city. If you make a call, they will trace the signal in less than 10 seconds. They will know where you are. More importantly, they will know where your brother is." "They don't care about my brother," Grace argued, her eyes filling with hot tears. "They want me." "They want you to suffer," Hyun-woo corrected her. "Miss Park is a very proud woman. I humiliated her by sleeping with a waitress in a cheap motel. She cannot touch me, so she will destroy everything you care about before she finally kills you. If she finds your brother, she will torture him just to hear you scream over the phone." Grace felt the blood drain from her face. Her stomach twisted into a tight, sick knot. The smell of the steak suddenly made her want to throw up. "She is a monster," Grace whispered, staring blindly at the food. "She is a survivor," Hyun-woo said. He pushed off the mantle and walked back to the table. He pulled a thick manila folder from inside his shirt and dropped it right onto her plate. "Just like me, and just like you need to be." Grace stared at the folder. "What is this?" "Open it." She hesitated, then wiped her sweaty palms on her sweatpants and flipped the folder open. Inside were several glossy photographs. Her breath hitched. It was her brother, Leo. He was lying in a large, bright hospital bed. The room looked like a luxury hotel suite, not a cheap, dirty ward. He was hooked up to clean, modern machines. There was a nurse standing next to him, smiling as she checked his IV bag. In the next photo, Leo was asleep, looking peaceful. For the first time in months, he didn't look like he was in pain. Under the photos was a thick stack of medical documents. Grace recognized the logo at the top. It was the most expensive private clinic in the state. "I paid for the next 6 months in advance," Hyun-woo said, his voice right next to her ear. She hadn't even heard him move behind her chair. "He has the top specialists in the country working on his heart defect. He is safe, he is comfortable, and he is completely hidden under a fake name." Grace traced her brother's face in the photograph with a shaking finger. A tear slipped down her cheek and landed on the glossy paper. She wiped it away quickly. "Thank you," she choked out. She hated saying it. She hated that she owed him. Hyun-woo rested his heavy hands on her shoulders. She stiffened, but he didn't move away. His thumbs slowly rubbed the tight muscles at the base of her neck. "Do not thank me yet, Grace," he whispered, bending down so his lips brushed her ear. "This protection comes with a heavy price." "I already gave you what you wanted," she said, her voice cracking. "I slept with you. You got your revenge on your fiancé, or whatever twisted game you are playing. What else can you possibly take from me?" "Everything," he stated simply. He moved around the chair and leaned over the table, trapping her in the seat. He reached down and flipped to the last page in the folder. It was a contract. It was covered in dense legal text, but the bold words at the bottom were clear. It was a transfer of legal guardianship. "If you try to run," Hyun-woo said, tapping his finger on the signature line. "If you try to contact anyone from your old life, if you disobey me in any way, I will pull the funding. I will legally discharge him from that clinic, and I will leave him on the sidewalk outside the public hospital. He will not last a week without those machines." Grace stared at the paper. The words blurred together. A cold, suffocating panic gripped her throat. She couldn't breathe. She looked up at him, her eyes wide with pure, unfiltered horror. "You are a devil," she breathed. "You are worse than she is." "I am whatever I need to be to protect what is mine," he replied. He picked up a black pen from the tray and held it out to her. Sign it. No, she shook her head, pressing her back hard against the chair. No, I won't. I won't give you control over him. You already have, Hyun-woo said. His patience was gone. His eyes turned completely black, void of any light or warmth. This is just a piece of paper to remind you of your reality. Sign it, Grace, or I make a phone call right now and the machines get turned off. You wouldn't, she cried, tears spilling fast and hot down her face. Hyun-woo pulled a sleek black phone from his pocket. He tapped the screen once, holding his thumb over the green call button. He stared at her, waiting. He would do it. She saw it in his eyes. He didn't care about Leo. He didn't care about anyone but himself and his twisted need for control. He had ordered 2 men shot in the head like it was nothing. Turning off a machine was easy for a man like him. Okay, she screamed, snatching the pen from his hand. Okay, I'll sign it. Damn you to hell, I'll sign it. She grabbed the paper and scribbled her name on the bottom line. Her signature was a messy, jagged scrawl. She threw the pen across the room. It bounced off the far wall with a sharp crack. Hyun-woo calmly picked up the contract, checked the signature, and slid the paper back into the folder. He tucked the folder under his arm. Good girl, he said softly. The dark monster vanished again, replaced by the calm, polite billionaire. Now, eat your dinner, you need your strength. Grace looked at the steak. It looked like rotting flesh to her now. I'm not hungry. Eat, he ordered, his voice hardening just a fraction. Or I will sit here all night and watch you starve. Your choice. Grace picked up the heavy knife and fork. Her hands shook violently. She cut a small piece of meat and put it in her mouth. She chewed, but she couldn't taste anything. It felt like dry ash. She swallowed hard, forcing it down her tight throat. Hyun-woo watched her take 3 more bites. Satisfied, he turned and walked toward the massive bed. He sat on the edge and reached down, pulling off his shiny black shoes. He stood up and began unbuttoning his white shirt. Grace stopped chewing. The fork froze halfway to her mouth. What are you doing? She asked, her voice a terrified whisper. I am getting ready for bed, he said casually. He pulled the shirt off his shoulders and tossed it onto a nearby chair. Grace stared at his back. It was wide and heavily muscled, but that wasn't what caught her eye. His skin was covered in scars. Long, jagged white lines crisscrossed over his shoulder blades and down his spine. Some looked like knife wounds. One round, puckered scar on his lower back looked exactly like a bullet hole. He was rich, he was powerful, but he was also a man who had survived a violent, bloody world. He turned around. His chest was just as scarred. He looked at her staring. He didn't try to cover up. He seemed proud of the marks. I told you, he said, unbuckling his expensive leather belt. I will sleep in this bed whenever it pleases me, and tonight it pleases me. Grace dropped the fork. It hit the china plate with a loud clatter. She stood up from the velvet chair. Her legs felt like jelly, but she locked her knees. No, she said. She shook her head. I am not sleeping in that bed with you. You got what you wanted. I signed your damn paper. Let me sleep on the couch. Let me sleep on the floor. I don't care. Hyun-woo stopped unbuckling his belt. He looked at her, his head tilted slightly to the side. You think you still have a choice in this house? I won't do it, she said, her voice rising. You can control my brother's doctors. You can lock me in this room, but you cannot force me into that bed. I won't let you touch me again. Hyun-woo let out a short, dark laugh. He walked slowly toward her. The predatory grace in his steps made the hair on her arms stand up. Grace backed away, but she bumped into the heavy table. The silver tray rattled behind her. She was trapped again. He stopped right in front of her. The heat radiating off his bare chest warmed the cold air between them. He reached out and grabbed a fistful of her baggy white t-shirt, pulling her hard against his body. Grace gasped, her hands flying up to push against his scarred chest. It felt like pushing against a brick wall. I do not have to force you, Grace, he whispered, his lips brushing against her forehead. You will get into that bed because the alternative is sleeping in the snow outside with the dogs. You will sleep next to me because you are terrified, and right now, I am the only thing keeping you alive in this world. He let go of her shirt and pointed to the massive, dark gray bed. Get in, he commanded. Grace stared at the massive, dark gray bed. It looked like a tomb. She looked back at Hyun-woo. His bare chest rose and fell evenly. The jagged white scars across his skin looked harsh in the golden light of the bedroom. He wasn't rushing her. He wasn't grabbing her. He was just standing there, waiting for her to break. "I hate you," she said. The words tasted like poison in her mouth. "I know," he replied softly. He walked over to the edge of the bed and pulled the heavy blankets back. "But hate will keep you warm. The snow outside will not. Now get in." She wanted to run. She looked at the heavy double doors. She thought about making a break for it, running down the sweeping staircase and trying to pull the front doors open. But then she remembered the men with the black rifles. She remembered the massive black dog in the snow. And she remembered the piece of paper she had just signed, giving this monster complete control over her sick brother's life. She had no moves left. Checkmate. She slowly walked toward the bed. Her bare feet dragged across the thick rug. Every step felt incredibly heavy, like she was walking underwater. She reached the edge of the mattress and climbed up. The sheets were cold against her skin through her thin white t-shirt. She slid under the heavy blankets and moved as far to the edge as she could, turning her back to him. She curled her body into a tight ball, pulling her knees up to her chest. Hyun-woo reached over and turned off the small lamp on the bedside table. The room plunged into darkness, lit only by the dying orange glow of the fireplace. The mattress dipped heavily behind her. Grace stopped breathing. She felt the heat radiating off his large body before he even touched her. He slid under the blankets. He didn't stay on his side. He moved right up behind her. His chest pressed against her back. His heavy arm wrapped over her waist, his large hand resting flat against her stomach. He pulled her flush against him, trapping her against the solid wall of his chest and legs. Grace squeezed her eyes shut. A single, hot tear rolled down her nose and soaked into the expensive pillow. She was a prisoner in his bed, in his house, in his twisted life. Listen up, besties. If you are feeling the suffocating tension in this dark bedroom, you need to hit that like button right now. Liking the video tells the algorithm to push more gritty, intense romance stories just like this one straight to your feed. And drop a comment for me, rate this video from 1 to 10, or tell me where you are watching from tonight. But hear me loud and clear. If you do not hit that subscribe button for Afro-Korean Love FM right now, you are leaving Grace alone in the dark with a ruthless billionaire who owns her completely. Don't be the reason she loses her fight. Subscribe now, join the family, and stand with her. Let's get back to the story. "Stop shaking," Hyun-woo murmured. His voice was thick and raspy in the quiet room. His lips brushed against the back of her neck, sending a violent shiver down her spine. "I can't," she whispered back, her voice cracking in the dark. "Please, just let me go. I won't tell anyone anything. I just want to go home." His arm tightened around her waist, pulling her even closer. His grip was possessive and unyielding. "You are home, Grace. Go to sleep." He didn't say another word. Within minutes, his breathing deepened into a slow, steady rhythm. He fell asleep easily, like a man without a single care in the world. Grace stayed wide awake. She listened to the wind howling against the glass balcony doors. She listened to the cracking of the dying fire. But mostly, she listened to the steady, strong heartbeat thumping against her back. It was a sick, twisted feeling. The man holding her had ordered 2 people shot right in front of her. He had blackmailed her. He had stolen her freedom. Yet, lying there in the freezing Chicago winter, his heat was the only thing keeping her warm. He was the monster under her bed, but he was also the monster guarding the door. The hours dragged on. Grace's eyes burned with exhaustion, but her brain refused to shut down. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the scarred man's face in the alley, the dark hole appearing between his eyes. She saw Miss Park's cold, imaginary face laughing at her. Slowly, the black sky outside the windows turned into a dull, ugly gray. Morning had come. Hyun-woo stirred behind her. He shifted his weight, his hands sliding off her stomach. He sat up. Grace kept her eyes closed, pretending to be deeply asleep. She felt the mattress lift as he got out of bed. She heard his bare feet walk across the floor, followed by the soft click of the bathroom door shutting. A minute later, the shower turned on. Grace finally opened her eyes. She let out a long, shaky breath and rolled onto her back. The space beside her was empty, but the sheets still smelled like his expensive cologne and warm skin. She hated that she noticed it. She sat up slowly. Her body ached from staying completely tense all night. She rubbed her tired eyes and looked around the massive room. In the harsh gray light of the winter morning, the room didn't look romantic or grand. It just looked like a very expensive cage. The bathroom door opened. Hyun-woo stepped out. The steam rolled out behind him. He had a white towel wrapped around his waist. Water dripped from his black hair, running down his chest and over his thick scars. He didn't even glance at her. He walked straight into the huge walk-in closet. When he came back out 10 minutes later, the monster was completely hidden again. He wore a sharp, custom-made navy blue suit. His white shirt was crisp, his silk tie perfectly knotted. His black shoes shined. He looked like a man who owned the city, a man who fired people and bought companies before lunch. Nobody looking at him would ever guess what he did in dark alleys. He walked over to a small wooden desk near the window and picked up a sleek black cell phone. He tossed it onto the bed. It landed near Grace's knee. "The doors will not be locked today," he said, adjusting his silver watch. He still didn't look at her. "You can walk around the house. You can go to the kitchen, the library, the living rooms, but you will not go near the front doors. If you try to open them, the guards will put you on the floor." Grace picked up the phone. It was heavy and completely blank, except for a single green phone icon on the screen. "Who am I supposed to call?" she asked bitterly. "Me," he answered, finally turning his dark eyes to her. "That button dials my private line. It does not dial 911. It does not dial your friends. The police in this district work for Miss Park's father. If you somehow find a regular phone and call the cops, they will come here, arrest you, and deliver you straight to her. Understand?" "You've thought of everything, haven't you?" she spat, glaring at him. "I survive because I think of everything," he replied smoothly. He walked toward the double doors. "The kitchen staff will make you whatever you want. Eat something, you still look sick. I will be back at 8 o'clock tonight." He opened the doors and stepped out into the hallway. "And Grace," he paused, looking back over his shoulder. "What?" she snapped. "Do not try to jump off the balcony. The fall will only break your legs, and I will be very annoyed if I have to feed you through a tube." He shut the doors behind him. The heavy lock didn't click this time. Grace sat alone in the massive bed. She picked up the black phone and threw it hard against the wall. It bounced off the thick wallpaper and hit the floor without breaking. He had given her an unbreakable toy to keep her quiet. She threw the covers off and swung her legs out of bed. She was exhausted, hungry, and furious. She needed to see exactly how big her cage was. She walked over to the double doors and grabbed the brass handles. She half expected them to be locked, just to mess with her head. But they turned easily. She pushed the doors open and stepped out into the long, dark hallway. The house was incredibly quiet. The thick red carpet swallowed the sound of her bare feet. She walked past several closed doors until she reached the top of the grand, sweeping staircase. She looked down. The massive front doors were shut tight. Standing on the black marble floor at the bottom of the stairs were two men in dark suits. They didn't have rifles anymore, but they had obvious, heavy bulges under their jackets. One of the guards looked up and saw her. He didn't say a word. He just stared at her with blank, dead eyes, shifting his weight slightly. Grace backed away from the stairs. Hyun-woo wasn't bluffing. She turned around and wandered down a different hallway. She found a massive library with walls covered in old, dusty books. She found a private movie theater with huge leather chairs. She found a formal dining room with a table long enough to seat 30 people. Every room was beautiful, and every room was empty. She finally found the kitchen at the back of the house. It looked like a restaurant kitchen, with shiny stainless steel counters and massive industrial stoves. Two women in gray uniforms were chopping vegetables. A tall man in a white chef's coat was stirring a huge pot of soup. The smell made Grace's empty stomach roar loudly. The staff stopped what they were doing and looked at her. Nobody smiled. Nobody said hello. I'm hungry," Grace said, feeling stupid in her oversized sweatpants and t-shirt. The chef nodded once. He pointed to a small, round table sitting in a sunny corner of the kitchen, looking out over the snowy backyard. Grace walked over and sat down. The chair was hard wood. A minute later, one of the women in the gray uniforms brought over a white ceramic mug of black coffee and a plate of scrambled eggs and toast. The woman set the food down quickly, keeping her eyes glued to the floor, and hurried back to her cutting board. They were terrified. They were acting like she was a ghost or a disease they didn't want to catch. Thank you, Grace said to the woman's back. The woman didn't respond. Grace sighed and picked up the mug of coffee. It was hot and strong. She took a sip and set the mug back down on the small white saucer. As she pulled her hand away, she noticed something. Tucked halfway under the edge of the saucer was a small, square piece of white paper. It was folded perfectly in half. Grace frowned. She looked over at the staff. They were all busy, their backs turned to her. Nobody was watching. Her heart started to beat a little faster. She reached out slowly, slid the paper out from under the saucer, and dropped it into her lap. She kept her hands under the table and used her thumbs to flip the paper open. It was a small, glossy photograph. Grace felt the blood drain from her face. Her breath caught in her throat. The picture was taken at night, but the bright orange and yellow flames lit up the scene perfectly. It was Joanna's diner, her diner, the place she had worked for 5 years. The roof was caved in, and massive walls of fire were shooting out of the front windows. The heavy metal back door was blown completely off its hinges. Written across the bottom of the photo in thick, blood-red ink were 2 short sentences. "He cannot hide you forever. See you soon, cheap trash. P." Grace's hands started shaking so violently she dropped the photo. It fluttered onto the floor between her bare feet. Miss Park. She had burned down the diner. And worse, she had somehow gotten this picture inside Hyun-woo's impenetrable fortress. Someone in this house, someone standing in this very kitchen, worked for the crazy woman who wanted her dead. Grace looked up, her wide, terrified eyes scanning the chef and the 2 maids. Which one was it? Which one had slipped the note under her coffee? Suddenly, the warm kitchen felt like a freezer. Hyun-woo had promised she was safe here. He had said nobody could touch her behind these walls. He was wrong. The monster was already inside the house. Grace stared at the glossy paper resting on the floor between her bare feet. The bright orange flames eating her diner looked too real. She felt completely sick. Her stomach turned over, and the eggs she just ate threatened to come right back up. She quickly reached down, snatched the photo, and shoved it deep into the pocket of her baggy gray sweatpants. Her hands were sweating. She stood up fast. The heavy wooden legs of her chair scraped loudly against the kitchen tile. The sound was harsh, cutting through the quiet room like a knife. The tall chef immediately stopped stirring his massive metal pot. The 2 women in gray uniforms stopped chopping vegetables. All 3 of them turned slowly to look at her. Their faces were completely blank. No surprise, no questions. One of them had just handed her a direct death threat from a crazy billionaire, and they were all acting like nothing was wrong. "Who poured my coffee?" Grace asked. Her voice shook badly, but she tried to make it loud. "Which one of you gave me that cup?" The staff just stared at her. Nobody moved. The chef wiped his large hands on a white towel. The older woman with gray hair looked down at her black work shoes. The younger woman, the one who had actually carried the tray to the table, just blinked her dark eyes. "I don't speak English well, miss," the younger woman mumbled, taking a slow step backward. It was a lie. Grace could see the shiny, cold fear in the woman's eyes. But was she scared of Grace, or was she scared of Miss Park? Grace took another step away from the table. Her eyes darted to the sharp, heavy knives resting on the stainless steel counters. Any of these people could grab one of those blades and end her life right now. Hyun-woo's grand fortress was a complete joke. The stone walls were high, the guards had big guns, but the enemy was already inside the house, serving her breakfast. Listen up, besties. If your blood is running cold right now, you need to hit that like button immediately. Liking the video tells the algorithm to push more intense, dark romance stories straight to your feed. And drop a comment for me, rate this terrifying moment from 1 to 10, or tell me what city you are watching from today. But pay attention. If you do not hit that subscribe button for Afro-Korean Love FM right this second, you are leaving Grace completely alone in a house full of traitors who want to burn her alive. Don't be the reason she doesn't make it out of this kitchen. Subscribe now, join our dark family, and help her survive. Let's get back to the danger. "Stay away from me," Grace warned, holding her hands up. She didn't wait for them to answer. She spun around and ran out of the kitchen. Her bare feet slapped against the cold marble floor of the hallway. She didn't look back to see if they were following her. She ran as fast as she could, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. She reached the grand, sweeping staircase and grabbed the wooden railing, pulling herself up the steps two at a time. She looked down over her shoulder. The two large men in dark suits were still standing at the bottom of the stairs by the front doors. They watched her run in a blind panic, but they didn't move a single muscle. They didn't care if she was scared. They only cared if she tried to leave. She reached the top floor and ran down the long, dark hallway with the thick red carpet. She slammed into the heavy double doors of her bedroom, pushing them open. She jumped inside and pulled the doors shut behind her. There was no lock on the inside. Hyun-woo had a key for the outside, but she had nothing to protect herself in here. "Shit," she hissed, looking wildly around the massive room. "Shit, shit, shit." She ran over to the velvet armchair sitting by the small table. It was heavy, but adrenaline pumped through her veins. She grabbed the back of the chair and dragged it across the thick rug. She shoved it hard against the brass door handles. Then she ran back, grabbed the small wooden table, and pushed it directly behind the chair, creating a heavy barricade. It wasn't perfect, but it would make a loud noise if someone tried to come in. She backed away from the doors, her chest heaving. She needed the phone. She had thrown it against the wall earlier. She dropped to her hands and knees and searched the floor near the window. She found the sleek black phone resting under the edge of the curtains. She picked it up. The screen was still completely blank except for the single green phone icon. She didn't want to call him. She hated him. He had kidnapped her and threatened to kill her brother. But as she touched the folded photo in her pocket, she knew she had no other choice. He was the devil, but right now, he was the only devil who wanted her alive. She pressed her shaking thumb against the green icon. The phone rang twice. It was a sharp, loud ringing that made her flinch. Then, the line clicked open. "I am in a board meeting," Hyun-woo's voice came through the speaker. It was icy, annoyed, and totally professional. "I told you I would be back at 8. "Someone is trying to kill me," Grace blurted out. The words tumbled over each other. "You lied to me. You said I was safe here. You said nobody could touch me." The line went completely silent. The background noise of rustling papers and coughing men vanished. Hyun-woo had clearly stepped out of his meeting. When he spoke again, the polite businessman was gone. The dangerous monster from the snowy alley was back. "Tell me exactly what happened," he ordered. His voice was so low it vibrated through the small speaker. "I went to the kitchen," Grace said, pacing back and forth at the foot of the giant bed. She kept her eyes glued to the barricaded doors. "They gave me coffee. When I picked up the cup, there was a folded paper underneath it. It was a picture of my diner, Joanna's diner. It was on fire, Hyun-woo. The whole place was burning down to the ground." "Are you hurt?" he asked quickly. "No," she cried, wiping a stray tear from her cheek. "But there was a message written in red ink. It said you couldn't hide me forever. It was signed with a P. Your crazy fiancé burned down my job, and one of your people handed me the picture. Someone in your kitchen works for her." She heard a sharp, heavy thud over the phone, like a fist hitting a solid wood door. "Who gave you the cup?" he demanded. "The young maid," Grace answered. "But it could be any of them. The chef, the older woman, they all just stared at me. They didn't care. They know I'm trapped here." "Listen to me, Grace," Hyun-woo said. His tone was sharp and commanding, leaving no room for argument. "Go back to the bedroom immediately. Do not speak to anyone else." "I am in the bedroom," she snapped back. "I pushed the heavy chair and the table against the doors, but they don't lock from the inside. Anyone can just push their way in if they try hard enough." "Good," he said. "Stay exactly where you are. Do not eat anything else. Do not drink the water from the bathroom sink. Do not open those doors for anyone, not the guards, not the staff. Nobody." "What are you going to do?" she asked, her voice dropping to a terrified whisper. "I am leaving the city now," he replied. "I will be there in 20 minutes. I am going to find out exactly who brought that note into my house, and I am going to make them deeply regret being born." The line clicked dead. He hung up. Grace lowered the phone slowly. Her hands were still shaking. She walked over to the edge of the bed and sat down. The room was huge, but it felt like a tiny box closing in on her. The silence was deafening. The only sound was the howling wind throwing snow against the glass balcony doors. She looked at the silver clock on the bedside table. It was exactly 10 o'clock in the morning, 20 minutes. She just had to survive for 20 minutes. She pulled her knees up to her chest and wrapped her arms tightly around her legs. She stared at the brass door handles behind the velvet chair. Every shadow in the room looked like a person hiding. Every creak of the old house sounded like footsteps coming down the hall. 10 minutes passed. It felt like 10 years. Grace's eyes burned from staring at the doors without blinking. Her mouth was completely dry, but she remembered his warning. Do not drink the water. Miss Park could have easily paid someone to poison the pipes or the bottles in the room. They didn't even have to stab her to kill her. Suddenly, a shadow passed under the crack of the double doors. Grace stopped breathing. She froze on the bed, her muscles locking up. Someone was standing right outside her room. She waited for a knock. She waited for a voice. Nothing came. The person just stood there in the dead silence. Then, the brass door handles slowly began to turn. Grace clamped her hand over her mouth to stop herself from screaming. The handles twisted all the way down. The heavy wood pushed against the velvet chair. The chair slid an inch across the rug with a soft, scraping sound. "Miss Grace," a voice called out softly from the hallway. It was the young maid from the kitchen, the one who didn't speak English well. Grace didn't answer. She pressed herself harder against the padded headboard of the bed. "Miss Grace, Mr. Kwon called the house," the maid said. Her voice sounded sweet, almost friendly. "He told me to bring you some fresh towels and a bottle of sealed water. Please open the door." It was a trap. Hyun-woo had specifically told her not to open the door for anyone. He wouldn't call the house and send the very person she suspected of being a spy. Miss Park's people were making their move before he could get back. "Go away," Grace yelled, her voice cracked, betraying her fear. "Mr. Kwon told me to stay in here. Leave the towels on the floor." The sweet tone instantly vanished from the maid's voice. "Open the damn door, bitch," the woman hissed through the crack. Grace's heart pounded against her ribs like a hammer. She scrambled off the high bed and ran to the fireplace. The fire had died down to glowing orange coals, but the heavy iron fire tools were still sitting on the stone edge. She grabbed the long, pointed iron poker. It was heavy and cold in her hands. She gripped it tight like a baseball bat and turned back to face the doors. She heard the sharp, metallic scrape of a key sliding into the lock on the outside of the doors. The lock clicked open. "No," Grace whispered, backing up until her shoulders hit the wall next to the fireplace. The person outside shoved the doors hard. The heavy wood hit the velvet chair, pushing it and the small table several feet across the room. The barricade collapsed loudly, the table falling over onto its side. The double doors swung wide open. The young maid stood in the doorway. She wasn't holding any soft white towels. She wasn't holding a bottle of water. In her right hand, she held a long, thick butcher knife from the kitchen. The shiny steel blade caught the light from the hallway. The woman stepped into the room. Her eyes were completely different now. The fake fear was gone. She looked dead inside, like a machine programmed to do one job. "Miss Park sends her regards," the maid said, stepping over the fallen table. "Stay back," Grace screamed, raising the heavy iron poker high above her head. "I swear to God I will hit you." The maid just smirked. She took another step into the room, raising the massive knife. "You should have stayed in the alley. It would have been faster." The woman lunged forward, bringing the sharp blade down toward Grace's chest.